pending in that state. Last month, those trials ended, and tonight, this program will be broadcast in Massachusetts for the first time.
The report which follows is a document of fact regarding crime. No actors or reenactments are used.
Report is a key store in Boston, Massachusetts. Address 364 Massachusetts Avenue. Until recently, this was the busiest store in the neighborhood. Perhaps one of the busiest key stores in the world. Open for business 6 days a week. 9 hours a day in the winter, 12 hours a day in the summer. During business hours, cars double parked in front. And on some days, more than 1,000 customers entered this door. Many proceeded to a room in the rear of the store. We followed with a concealed microphone and camera. The men behind the counter are called Bookies. They're taking off-track bets on horses and dog races and selling chances on the numbers game, a form of lottery.
What do you want now?
What they're doing is illegal in every state of the Union except Nevada. They are among thousands of bookies engaged in a nationwide, multi-billion-dollar-a-year business, a business that has been called the treasure chest of the underworld.
Is your money?
How does organized gambling operate? How does this business continue despite laws against it? Officers, how does this affect the community and the nation?
CBS Reports, Biography of a Bookie Joint.
This is Walter Cronkite. Experts agree that organized gambling is the most lucrative, most corrupting, and most widely tolerated form of crime in the nation. This huge business pits the government of the underworld against the government of the people. The corner bookie, to be found in most American cities, is at the base of the problem. He is the so-called little man, but he is the funnel through which billions of dollars a year flow into the underworld. It is our purpose tonight to examine the consequences of the nickels, the dimes, and the dollars wagered with the corner bookie. He and his associates might operate out of a hotel room in New York or a tavern in San Francisco, or, as in the case of this report, a key store on Massachusetts Avenue. Boston's Massachusetts Avenue is a main thoroughfare, 6 lanes wide. Here it passes through Back Bay, Boston, a predominantly white area, to the South End section, predominantly colored. The Swartz Key Shop is in Back Bay near the dividing line. Its customers come here from both neighborhoods. The dome of this Christian Science church is the dominating landmark in the area. It is 3 blocks from the Key Shop. 1 block away is the Boston Sports Arena. Boston Symphony Hall is 2 blocks away. And the nearest precinct police station is a half a mile from the Key Shop. This report continues in the words of producer-reporter Jay McMullen.
We found that at least one lookout usually was posted near the front door of the Key Shop. Most of the time he stayed inside, keeping watch through the front window. Across the street we found an apartment. Here we could watch the key store without being seen. We moved in our cameras at 11 p.m. on the night of May 31st, 1961. By early morning, our cameras began to observe the key store close up. But CBS Reports was not the first to investigate the activity here.
In 1951, the Key Store was brought to the attention of the New England Citizens Crime Commission. Dwight Strong, Executive Secretary of the Crime Commission, received the complaint.
A former state official came to my office. He'd been in the key shop, had keys made, and suspected illegal gambling activity. I went there, went into the place, saw several customers at a counter toward the rear. Behind the counter were 2 men who were writing on 3x5 pads. The customers had slips and money in their hands. I could not see what were on these slips. They looked up and wondered what I wanted. I said, I'd like some keys made. One of the men came and took my key and went to the key machine and made the keys for me, and I left the shop at that time.
What happened after that?
Well, we were unable to start a full-scale investigation for shortage of manpower. We did bring it to the attention of the Massachusetts State Special Crime Commission, which was created in 1953 by the state legislature to investigate gambling activities throughout the state.
State Crime Commission agents investigated the Key store, observed illegal gambling here, and found evidence that this was more than a local operation. Tom McCardle, former chief counsel of the Massachusetts State Crime Commission.
We checked on the telephone toll calls of this establishment, and we found a great deal of interstate telephone toll activity to various places in the country.
What did that imply to you?
Well, we concluded that bets were being laid off.
What do you mean by laid off?
Well, a layoff is a device whereby a bookie balances his book. If he has too much bet on a given horse, let us say, he doesn't want to carry the entire risk. He will call to some bookmaker elsewhere, very frequently outside of the Commonwealth, and find one, and is able to find one who will take part of the risk that he has on that particular horse.
The State Crime Commission found that toll calls from Massachusetts bookies went out to more than 50 cities across the nation, including such major layoff centers as Newport and Covington, Kentucky, and Chicago, Illinois. The calls went as far north as Montreal, as far south as New Orleans and Miami, as far west as Las Vegas and Los Angeles. In August 1961, testimony at McClellan Committee hearings on illegal gambling alleged that Boston itself is one of the major layoff centers in the nation. This map, displayed at the hearings by the Internal Revenue Service, shows a network of major layoff pipelines throughout the country. The map does not include a maze of so-called minor connections between the gamblers. Even a small store may be part of a network. Evidence that the Key store was engaged in interstate gambling activity had been found by the State Crime Commission. Jay McMullen asked Tom McCardle what happened to this evidence.
When the Crime Commission was terminated, we turned over our files to the Criminal Information Bureau of the State Police. I do know that the Massachusetts Police Chiefs Association made a public statement some several months later that all of the information that we had been examined by many of its members, and that they found nothing of interest to them as law enforcement officers.
They said there was nothing of interest in the information you supplied?
In substance, that's what they said, yes.
The State Crime Commission investigating organized gambling was terminated by the legislature in 1957. At the Key store, business continued. It is a violation of the city ordinance to burn trash on the sidewalk. But here the smoke of burning betting slips remained a common sight, a beacon for bettors. In June 1957, some of the bettors turned out to be agents of the Internal Revenue Service. This is H. Allen Long, Director of Intelligence, Internal Revenue Service.
Mr. Long, on June 21st, 1957, Treasury agents raided the Swartz Key shop in Boston, but no arrests were made. Why?
Because at that time, the only individual we found taking bets there was a man who had a federal wagering tax stamp. Therefore, there was no violation and no basis for an arrest.
In other words, no federal law prohibits off-track betting, is that right?
That is correct, but the law does require an off-track bookie to buy a $50 wagering tax stamp and to file an excise tax return with which he pays a tax of 10% of his gross bets.
Suppose he does all of that. Suppose he buys the wagering stamp, registers, pays his excise tax. Can this be construed as a license to break the state anti-gambling laws?
No, absolutely not.
Well, after a bookie registers, is this information available to the local police?
Yes, the copy of his application is a public record in the district director's office. The local police, or newspaper reporters, anyone who is interested can go there and look at it.
They can see that this bookie is registered and where he is operating, the address.
That's right.
Well, doesn't the law also require the registered bookie to display a gambling stamp on the premises where he operates as further notification to the police and to the public that he is in business?
Yes, it does.
Why do you think that most bookies fail to register?
Probably because the law is self-defeating in the fact that when a bookie registers and announces that he is engaged in this business and where he is engaged in it, he is openly inviting investigation and possible prosecution by the local police.
It was a matter of public record that one operator at the key store was a registered bookie. This man, carrying the trash can, had purchased a federal wagering stamp. He could continue his activity as a bookie and could openly dump charred betting slips on the street without fear of federal interference. He remained in business, and business at the key store continued for the next 3 years. In September 1960, the state police received a complaint about illegal gambling at the key store. This is Carl Larson, Executive Officer, Massachusetts State Police.
As a result of receiving this complaint, a survey was conducted at this location by state police officers. Evidence of illegal gaming was observed, and as a result of this observation, a letter was sent by this department to the Boston Police Commissioner advising him of our findings.
Why did you pass on this information instead of taking direct action yourselves against the key shop?
It has been our policy to forward information of this nature to the local police departments so that they may take action on these offenses.
Boston Police Commissioner Leo Sullivan's reply to the state police letter alleged that Abraham Swartz, owner of the key store, had been arrested by the Boston police on July 7, 1950, for promoting a lottery. That in Roxbury Court, on July 10, 1950, Swartz paid a $50 fine on that lottery charge. Since that time, this location, said the Boston Police Commissioner in his letter to the state police, has been under surveillance. Search warrants have been obtained on several occasions, but no evidence of illegal gaming was found. In November 1960, after receipt of the Boston Police Commissioner's letter, state police conducted another investigation of the key store.
On November 18, 1960, the state police made another surveillance of illegal gambling at Swartz's key shop, and evidence of gaming was again found. As a result of finding this evidence, another letter was forwarded to the Boston Police Commissioner.
Well, now, this was the second complaint that you had sent to the Boston Police Commissioner regarding the key shop. What was the reply to this letter?
We received a reply from the Boston Police Commissioner stating that on that same date, November 18th, the Boston police officers had entered this building and that no evidence of gaming was found.
Now, on November 18th, your men were also in the key shop investigating.
That's correct. This was the same date that our men made the survey.
And found evidence of gambling.
Yes.
By the fall of 1960, the New England Crime Commission also was investigating the key store.
We'd had many complaints of illegal gambling at the key shop. I had manpower available and assigned agents to investigate this complaint. We went into the shop and placed bets, over 50 of them.
For almost a year, agents of the New England Crime Commission gathered evidence of illegal gambling at the key store. In the spring of 1961, CBS began documenting the Commission's observations with microphone and camera. We present a composite of picture and sound recorded during the course of our investigation. First, we wanted to know how the bookies operated and how much business they handled in the course of a day. Reporter McMullen and our cameras began observing the store on June 3rd, 1961 at 5:30 a.m.
The two men waiting in the doorway are bookies who operate at the key store. This is the man they are waiting for, the owner of the store, Abraham Swartz. The tall man with glasses walking behind Swartz is also a bookie who works on the morning shift. The others are either customers or helpers. At 5:30 a.m., the door is unlocked and the key store is open for business. These pigeons appeared out of nowhere within 2 or 3 minutes after the key store opened. We learned that this was a morning ritual. From 5:30 to 8 a.m., the number of people who entered the key store totaled by our count 167 persons. Many of them probably stopped off here on their way to work. Most remained inside for only a few minutes. By 8:05 a.m., this trash can had been placed outside the door. During the day, the bookies brought it out 5 different times. Inside it, they burned carbon copies of betting slips. Their receipts of bets already won or lost. The evidence went up in smoke. These youngsters were on their way to school. By 10 a.m., 275 persons had entered the key store. Persons carrying in satchels or paper bags were of special interest to the New England Crime Commission. Dwight Strong explains why.
We suspected that some of these men were pickup men who goes around from bookies the various slips and money that have been taken in a tavern, in a store, a hotel, a factory, or an office, and brings them to some central place. Some of these pickup men may have 100 or more slips in one of these bags. At this place, these slips are turned in, and of course we cannot tell the volume of business by the number of persons who enter through the door of a place like the key shop.
By 12 noon, 650 persons had entered the door of the key shop. The cars of customers blocked traffic on Massachusetts Avenue. The owners of these cars came from all walks of life. A postal clerk, a factory worker, a certified public accountant, an engineer.
A CBS reporter also entered the key shop, Jay McMullen.
This reporter was dressed informally when he entered the key shop with a lunchbox at 2:30 p.m. To place a bet, you pass beneath these signs advertising keys and locks. You head toward a small room in the rear of the store.
I'd like to put in a couple of numbers, huh?
As many as 30 people crowd into this room at one time. To place your bet, you have to wait in line. This is one of 4 bookies who works the afternoon shift.
Missiles from heaven, Judge.
Notice the small child.
First in New York, good and busy, yeah?
Stick 'em up, is what she said to the bookie.
3, unmissable, yeah?
The bettors are not breaking the law. The bookies are.
9, 1.
But if the bookies have any anxiety about a raid, they certainly do not show it.
Give me 1314. Yeah? Give me 131.
Most of their business in the afternoon is in bets on horse races. The minimum you can bet on a horse race at a racetrack is $2. Here the minimum is $1.50. We watched some of the customers bet as much as $50. We're told that a $100 bet is not unusual. The bookies claim that they pay the same betting odds as the racetracks. It's generally reported that most bookies pay lower odds than the track. According to some of the customers, bookies at the key shop have never been known to welch on a bet. As one customer put it, this is a first-class bookie joint. By 2:45 p.m., this reporter had placed his bet and was on his way out of the key shop, past counters where keys are seldom sold. My betting slip was in my hand. I was just one of 875 customers who had entered the key shop by 3 p.m., when, as usual, it closed for the afternoon. Elsewhere, betting on the horses continued.
Here, the bettor who has the time and the inclination can bet his entire bankroll legally. Pari-mutuel horse tracks are licensed in 25 states. Total attendance at these tracks last year, 48.5 million persons. The handle, or total amount of money bet, $3.5 billion. $1 billion more than the nation spent last year on new schools, classrooms, and textbooks. From the $3.5 billion in bets on horses, the states receive $258 million in tax revenue. For every bet made here legally, it is estimated that at least 3 bets are made off-track illegally at places like the Key Store. We resume now with the activity at the store during the day of June 3rd, 1961.
The door of the Key Store has been locked since 3 p.m. At 6:45 p.m., the store once again is open for business. These people are here either to collect on winning bets made earlier in the day or to bet on dog races, which are run at night. The customers flocked in such numbers that it was difficult to keep a count on them. 973 customers had entered the door by 7:30 p.m.
By 7:30 p.m., Boston's Wonderland, the world's largest dog track, is open for business. Here, gambling on dog races is legal. Attendance at this track during the racing season averages 12,000 persons a night. Total attendance during the 1960 season, 1,214,000. Pari-mutuel wagering on dogs is legal at 35 tracks in 8 states. At Wonderland, more than $683,000 was wagered in one night. The total amount wagered at dog tracks throughout the nation exceeded $2 billion in 1960. $200 million of this went to the states in tax revenue. It has been estimated that for each bet made at a pari-mutuel dog track, at least one other bet is made off-track. The states receive no tax revenue from off-track bets made with bookies at places like the Key Store.
In the evening, you see new faces among the bookies at the Key Store. The day men have gone home. This is the night shift at work.
Second race.
Here, the betting odds on the dog races are based, as in horse race bets, on the pari-mutuel odds at the track.
Fifth race to the sixth.
At 8:30 p.m., wagering on the dog races was continuing here at Wonderland Dog Track.
At 8:30 p.m., the Key Shop closed for the day. In this one day, June 3rd, 1961, a total of 1,246 customers had passed through the door.
Evidence to be detailed later in the program indicates that the gross income of the Key Store may have exceeded $25,000 a week. That's $1.5 million a year, and that's no penny ante operation by any means. And yet, it seems small in contrast to some of the largest bookie establishments uncovered by the Internal Revenue Service. A bookmaking operation in Louisiana grossed $23,000 in a single day. Another in Indiana grossed more than $1 million in 3 days. And still another in California, $374,000 in 7 days, according to the Internal Revenue Service. Now, some of these bookies operated out of taverns and stores like the Key Shop. In Evansville, Illinois, this tote board used by bookies was found in the back room of a tavern. Here are adding machines and bags of lottery slips seized in a Miami home. These rifles, shotguns, pistols belonged to a bookie in San Francisco. And this is the cash drawer of a bookie who operated in a small room in Albany, New York. The Internal Revenue Service is the agency best qualified to know how much money the nation's bookies gross each year. H. Allen Long, Director of Intelligence, answered this question.
Estimates of the gross handle of illegal gambling have ranged from $5 to $50 billion a year. Has your department made any such estimate?
No, we have not. We have tried to arrive at a figure, but we have not been able to determine any logical basis for making an estimate.
Why is it difficult?
Because the amount of activity varies enormously from place to place and from time to time, and it is very difficult to determine how many people are actually engaged in business as professional bookies and how many customers they have, what volume of business they do.
Do you think it would be inaccurate to say that the illegal gambling is perhaps a multi-billion-dollar-a-year business?
That may be correct, although I would not want to estimate that it runs very high in the billions.
The experts may disagree on the total amount of money wagered illegally in the nation each year. But on one point, they do agree, and that is that illegal gambling cannot flourish for long unless it is protected. Reporter Jay McMullen discussed this point with Tom McCardle, former chief counsel, Massachusetts State Crime Commission.
You have told me that during your investigation you spoke off the record with quite a number of bookies. Did they indicate to you how they were able to avoid arrest and stay in business?
They said that they paid protection.
Did they say how much that would be?
No, that was a very difficult matter to discuss with any number of the individuals involved. However, I have seen figures from crime investigations in other states, which unhesitatingly put the figure at 50% of the net profit of the gaming operation.
Did the bookies ever tell you that they thought they were paying too much money for protection to the police?
Yes, several of them told us that the costs were getting so high that it was becoming more a police business than a bookie business.
We'll continue this biography of a bookie joint after this message. This is Walter Cronkite. In the next hour, we shall present a repeat broadcast of a controversial CBS Reports program, Biography of
One of 875 customers.
Volume of business they do.
Hesitatingly put the figure at 50% of the net profit of the gaming operation.
Biography of a Bookie Joint continues. Here again is Walter Cronkite.
Up to now, we have heard that the key shop had been investigated by 2 crime commissions, the Boston Police, the State Police, and the Internal Revenue Service. From June the 1st to June 3rd, 1961, we filmed 10 members of the Boston Police Force entering or leaving the key store. We don't know why they came to the key store or what they did inside. We only know that they were there, as Jay McMullen now reports.
June 1st, 1961. This motorcycle policeman entered the key store at 9:17 in the morning. Same day, 11:18 a.m. While this policeman remained inside, betting slips were dumped into the bookie's trash can. A few minutes later, another policeman arrived. The man pushing the trash can out of his way is a bookie. 10 minutes later, the same officer departed. 7 p.m., same day, June 1st. This is one of the policemen seen on June 2nd, 1961. He entered the key store at 8:58 in the morning. At 9:42 a.m., also June 2nd, this officer drove up in a prowl car. He did not leave the store until 10 minutes later. It is now June 3rd, 1961. This officer, getting out of the squad car, entered the key shop at 8:24 in the morning. The same officer left the store and drove off in a squad car at 8:35 a.m. 1 hour later, at 9:27, another squad car arrived. The officer stayed inside 5 minutes. The man coming out of the door now is a detective. We found that he comes from Central Headquarters, Boston Police Department.
Other Boston police officers were seen entering the key store during the course of our investigation. We must emphasize again that we do not know the nature of their business in the key store. Dwight Strong of the New England Crime Commission on the subject of the Boston Police.
I think most of the policemen in the Boston Police Department are honest and want to do their sworn duty. However, some of them have been in touch with me by calls and letters and have written on police department letterhead, although unsigned, suspected illegal gambling operations which they hope we will do something about.
We had a lieutenant of the police of a town outside of Boston who testified on the witness stand that he had procured a warrant to raid a gaming establishment in his community, and that as he came down the street with the police for the purpose of making the raid, he saw his police chief pull up in front of the place and then beckon and drive down the street, and the gaming operator came out and went down and had a very brief conversation with the police chief. When the raid was made, there was nothing there.
It has been said that police corruption can be found in every state where illegal gambling flourishes. The story has been told in headlines from cities across the nation time and time again. It is in part an answer to the question, what harm can there be in a little $2 bet at the corner bookie? It is not only the police that the bookie may attempt to corrupt. When he was chief counsel of the Massachusetts State Crime Commission, Tom McCardle was approached by a bookie who said that he and 24 other bookies would like to give McCardle some money as a goodwill gesture. Even when McCardle refused and got angry, the bookie continued to press him.
he said to me that he thought that my reaction of anger indicated that I was going to come at a pretty high price. And he said that he thought I probably was thinking of $25,000 for each of these contributors. And then later, by implication, he indicated that what he had in mind was that 10,000 would be about from each would be about as far as he was thinking.
10,000 from 25 bookies, $250,000, is that?
Yes, those are all round numbers. He said about 25 people.
And that would be put away for you if you would lay off the investigation.
Well, he didn't ask me to do a thing. He just asked me if he could figure out a way to put some money somewhere that I could get later.
But wasn't that...
Would I do it?
But wasn't that the implication?
I can't think of any other reason why he would be offering me anything.
If an opponent of the bookies cannot be bribed, there is another way to handle him. Here is what happened to Dr. Charles Cataldo, a Boston physician who formed a citizens committee to fight illegal gambling in his community and who gave evidence of gaming operations to the Massachusetts Crime Commission.
2 days later, when I went out to my car, I saw on the trunk, written in white crayon, the words, "I will shoot you through the face and through the back."
A reporter seeking information about illegal gambling must be careful, even when talking to officials and employees of the state. For, as we discovered during our observations of the key shop, the employee may turn out to work for the bookies or be a bookie himself.
The man getting out of that car at 5:45 a.m. on the morning of June 1st, 1961, worked at 2 different places during the day. Early in the morning, he worked as a bookie at the Swartz key shop. In a moment, he will be taking illegal bets on the numbers game on horse and dog races. He will remain inside about 3 hours. Usually, he left the key shop at 8:30 a.m. in order to be on time for his second job in another section of the city. It took him about 15 minutes to drive to his office here at the Metropolitan District Commission, a state agency that supervises the state parks and handles construction contracts.
It is difficult to know where bookies may be working or where they have influence. The state tax department is in this building. Tom McCardle of the Massachusetts State Crime Commission sent a state detective here to get some information on a bookie racketeer.
Before the state detective got back to our office, which was only a few hundred yards from the State House, a newspaper man called me and said to me that he had heard that I had a man at the Income Tax Bureau who was inquiring about Mr. X, and he said, just as a friend of yours, I want to tell you that you should be careful who you ask about certain persons and certain things. Another indication was what I learned from a conversation with the then police commissioner of Boston, who told me that he had made special arrangements, or had to make special arrangements, as to certain places for procuring warrants for gaming raids. And what he meant by special arrangements was that he would make arrangements either directly with a judge or in some other way so that warrants could be obtained rather surreptitiously or without the general knowledge of those in the court.
Why would he have to do that?
Well, as he said, the fear that if they were careless about requesting warrants, that the word would get to where they were going before the warrant did.
In other words, leak.
From somehow, somewhere, those who would learn of it in the courthouse.
It would appear that the bookies may have contacts even in the legislature of a state. Jay McMullen talked with Representative Harrison Chadwick, a former member of the Massachusetts State Crime Commission.
Is it not true that many of the legislators are lawyers who carry on a private law practice when the legislature is not in session?
Yes, that's true. They carry on their law practice both when we are and when we are not in session.
Have any of these legislators who also practice law ever told you that they represented bookies or illegal gambling operators?
Oh, yes. Yes, they do. Several have stated that they had bookies among their clients.
How did they happen to tell you that?
This came out in the conversation that we had about the Crime Commission and its work.
Do you recall anything specific that they said?
Well, I recall one who said that he would be glad if we were out of business because he wanted active bookies for the reason that he got good fat fees.
What's your reaction to this statement printed in the Boston Herald? The bulk of votes against the Crime Commission and its recommendations have come from legislators representing districts in which there is heavy off-track betting. They fear the bookies and their customers. They fear the kind of dirty campaigning that the bookies and their overlords can put on against anyone who openly fights this kind of organized crime. To such legislators, bookies speak louder than decent citizens.
There's a great deal of truth in the statement which the Boston Herald has made. I would like to distinguish between a wholesale condemnation of legislators and the fact that relatively few are actively involved in any of the illegal operations of the booking business. However, it is true that most of us follow the path of least resistance. And in many instances, the bookies are able to throw organizational workers and very considerable finances into a campaign to defeat someone whom they feel is hurting their operations, and consequently many an honest legislator prefers not to stir up a situation which can only cause him, as he sees it, very likely to come to grief.
Mr. McCardle on the bookie in politics.
One of our investigators had under surveillance a prominent gaming operator, a man who had been previously charged with murder, and he followed him into a barroom one day and saw him paying $20 each to several persons for helping in the campaign activities of a man who was running for the nomination for district attorney in one of our counties.
Dwight Strong.
Recently, we have had an assistant attorney general of the Commonwealth who turned out to be a business partner of a registered bookmaker, man registered with the federal government as a bookie. He has been suspended and removed from office.
A $2 bet with the corner bookie may result in fear, intimidation, violence, corruption. Some authorities say, and others disagree, that the problem of illegal gambling can best be met by legalized off-track betting. The question of legalized gambling will be examined on a future CBS Reports program.
Tonight's report will continue with the attempts to close up this bookie establishment immediately after. CBS Reports, Biography of a Bookie Joint, continues. Here again is Walter Cronkite.
By 1961, the Key Shop had reached its 10th year of operation. It had survived all efforts to put it out of business. In the summer of 1961, state police again investigated the Key Shop. Colonel Carl Larson, Massachusetts State Police.
Well, on August 4th, 1961, the state police again made a survey of this Key Shop. And gambling was found. We again forwarded a letter to the Boston Police Commissioner informing him of our findings. And a reply received from the Boston Police Commissioner stated that on August 4th, 1961, the Boston police officers had entered this establishment with search warrants and made a diligent search of the area, and that some evidence of gaming had been found, but insufficient for prosecution.
Now, your own men had gone in on August 4th also and found evidence. Is that correct?
That is correct.
CBS presented to the Department of Justice in Washington its evidence of illegal gambling at the Key store. CBS was informed that the Department of Justice would investigate the matter, that if the circumstances warranted, a raid would probably be made, but under no circumstances would we or any other news media be apprised in advance. CBS continued to film and observe activities at the Key store in the hope that if a raid did occur, we would be in a position to record it. Our hopes were realized. Jay McMullen reports what happened.
It is 2:35 p.m., September 29, 1961. One of the busiest times of day at the Key store. Suddenly we noticed that customers were turning away from the door. What we did not know at the moment was that Internal Revenue Service agents had entered the store and a raid was in progress. When these three gentlemen walked up to the door, there was no doubt that T-men had already acted. A few minutes later, a large crowd had assembled. I questioned this man.
Now, you live right here, don't you?
I have the property right next door. I own the property next door.
Have you noticed a lot of activity going on here?
Of course. There is a continuous, it's amazing, the hundreds of people each day going in and out of the place. It's almost ludicrous to watch a key shop and have it see so many people walking in and out and cars double parked here. It just becomes a picture that's so obvious to everybody.
Did you ever think of reporting it?
I've even seen police officers go in and out of the place, and it's so obvious that all of them, even the detectives, know about this, and it's so wide open that I have marveled that the place can be so wide open in a state like Boston or a city like this, and have it to go on with everybody knowing it.
How did that affect you insofar as whether or not to report this place?
Well, certainly it showed that there was little use of reporting it because everybody knew it, and so that there was little reason for my reporting it. And
how long has this place been open, as far as you know, that is engaged in this activity?
Well, I have had this property for better than 2 years, and it was going full swing, I'm sure, then, and has been going ever since. Even when this state gambling, there was a raid here back a year or two back, and the police closed down other places. This place continued to stay open.
It did stay open?
Right through it all? Yes. In fact, a person that I knew went in and warned them of something about it coming, and they didn't bat an eyelash. They stayed right open.
What would that infer to you?
Well, that there was a payoff somewhere.
How do you think the payoff, as you call it, affects this community? How do you think it affects what other people feel about
Well, I think the idea of law and order, as far as that is concerned, that people would have little respect to the actual law and order. I think it has a tendency to make the citizens not uphold the law like they might ordinarily do.
So that it may work in other directions. If a place like this is protected, then there may develop a certain cynicism, you think, toward the law?
Well, that's right. Of course, this is a thing for our children and for people in general. This, of course, is the attitude. I would say this is one of the ramifications of this type of operation going on.
The federal raid also hit 3 other alleged gambling establishments in the area, including this dry cleaning store. The Treasury agents had obtained 17 arrest warrants. 8 bookies at the Key store were among those arrested. The charge, failure to register as bookies under the federal wagering stamp law. This bookie who had registered could not be arrested. He walked to his $4,000 automobile and drove to his home in a fashionable Boston suburb. Later that afternoon, this was the scene in the corridor of the federal courthouse. These alleged bookies were arraigned before the U.S. District Commissioner. At the Swartz Key store, the federal agent seized $4,000 in cash. Apparently, part of the money bet with the bookies on the day of the raid, from 6:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. How much more might have been on hand at the usual closing hour of 8:30 p.m. is just a matter of speculation. But even $4,000 a day, 6 days a week, comes to $1,200,000 a year. But the story of the Key store does not end with the federal raid. Within a week after the raid, the store was reported again open for business. Jay McMullen counted the number of persons who entered the store in an hour-and-a-half period.
It is the morning of October 20th, 1961. This same key store, recently raided by federal agents, is back in business. The bookies are operating again at the same location. Between 6:30 a.m. and 8:10 a.m., we counted 125 persons who entered the door.
The state police also noticed that the key store was back in operation. Colonel Carl Larson, State Police.
On October 23rd, 1961, information was received by our department that the key shop was back in operation. I then discussed this matter with the Commissioner of Public Safety, Frank Giles, and he in turn discussed this entire matter with His Excellency Governor John A. Volpe. As a result of their conference, I was directed by Commissioner Giles to take direct action against the key shop.
Then, on October 27th, 1961, for the first time in 20 years, the state police raided a gambling establishment in Boston. They raided the key shop at 7:10 in the morning. The state police seized $2,000 inside the store. The raid resulted in the conviction of 2 persons. One of the persons convicted was this man, whom the federal agents could not arrest because he had registered as a bookie. Jay McMullen asked Colonel Larson why the state police had changed their 20-year policy of not raiding gambling establishments in Boston.
We have forwarded considerable information of this nature to the Boston police on many occasions, and they have taken action on this information. However, on information forwarded pertaining to this key shop, our surveys indicated that no action was taken by the Boston police.
3 days after the state police raid at the key shop, there was a shakeup in the Boston Police Department. 2 of Boston's 3 deputy police superintendents were demoted to captain, and 5 captains were transferred to different jobs. A Boston police announcement said the changes were made to promote the efficiency of the Boston Police Department. At a press conference, Governor John A. Volpe said he expects the Boston Police Commissioner to fulfill his responsibilities in full compliance with the law. We extended an invitation to Boston Police Commissioner Leo J. Sullivan to appear on this program, to comment on the difficulties facing local police departments in coping with illegal gambling, as reflected by the history of the key shop operation. Commissioner Sullivan has replied to our invitation with a letter outlining problems confronting local police. He points out that legalized on-track betting stimulates illegal off-track betting, that placing a bet off-track is not an offense, and that bookmaking is only a minor misdemeanor. He went on to say that the local police administrator has limited manpower and funds, and that the combined efforts of all law enforcement agencies have failed to dent the framework of illegal gambling. It would therefore be a grave injustice, said the police commissioner, to downgrade an entire police department and to destroy the public image created by the fine accomplishments of many dedicated police officers on the basis of one such gambling establishment. In the final analysis, the people of this and every other community must come to the realization that it is their small individual bet that finances the illegal gambling empire, and complete enforcement is not possible without the active assistance of all good citizens. Those were the words of Boston Police Commissioner Leo Sullivan. At this point, you may be inclined to say, well, those people in Boston certainly have their problems. Don't deceive yourself. The chances are very great you have the same problem in your community.
You have just seen Biography of a Bookie Joint, exactly as it was broadcast on the night of November 30th, 1961. Now for a brief review of comments and events which followed that original broadcast.
Precipitated the greatest furor in Boston since the Tea Party. The furor began with a denunciation of the program by Boston's Richard Cardinal Cushing. Speaking at the annual Policeman's Ball, His Eminence praised the Boston Police Department and declared, "In my theology, gambling in itself is not a sin. It's the abuses that make gambling evil. We all have our faults," said Cardinal Cushing, "but why hang them, as it were, like dirty linen on a clothesline from one end of the country to the other? Someone betrayed us." In a joint statement, prominent Protestant leaders took issue with the Cardinal's views, saying, "We find it exceedingly difficult to understand how exposure of rotted-out sections of our body politic can be called a betrayal." In the political arena, Democrat John Thompson, Speaker of the Massachusetts House of Representatives, said, "Boston alone was singled out by CBS for grossly unfair and distorted national publicity," and he charged there's been a cloud placed over the legislature. Thompson convoked a hearing of the House Rules Committee to determine whether or not Republican Representative Harrison Chadwick should be censured for his statements on the CBS broadcast, which Thompson said besmirched the reputations of his fellow legislators. At the hearing, Chadwick said he had documentary evidence that some lawyer legislators had defended bookies in court. The hearing also revealed that 2 legislators had been convicted of gaming long before their elections. Here is what happened when counsel for Chadwick said that one of these legislators had 4 gaming convictions and was presently a member of the House Rules Committee, then sitting in judgment of Chadwick.
It would be grossly unfair for a member in that situation, having been 4 times convicted in the criminal courts of Massachusetts, to sit
The chair would caution the gentleman that the gentleman in question has already indicated to me that he has disqualified himself from all aspects of this.
If he has, I think the judgment is very wise, and I compliment the Speaker.
While the Rules Committee pondered the fate of Representative Chadwick, Capitol Police raided the State House, found betting slips in a basement annex and in an elevator close to Governor John A. Volpe's office. According to police, on February 20th, 1962, the Massachusetts House of Representatives followed the recommendation of its predominantly Democratic Rules Committee and voted 110 to 98 to censure Chadwick on grounds that he had failed to substantiate his charges and had maligned the reputation of his colleagues in the House. No Republicans voted for censure. Representative Chadwick said, "It is now obvious that any public official who stands up and criticizes the deplorable conditions that exist in this state is liable to have his political head cut off on a purely political basis." In the next months, with misconduct involving contract splitting, participation in an insurance business, and with neglect of duty for failure to investigate police activity at the Key store. At a public hearing, Sullivan said that he did not investigate because he believed Biography of a Bookie Joint was fraudulent. CBS presented its proof that its film was authentic, and on March 8, 1962, Leo J. Sullivan resigned as police commissioner of Boston. Legislation was passed which returned to the city of Boston control over its police commissioner. Federal and state prosecutions resulting from the Key shop raids led to jail sentences, suspended jail terms, probations, and fines. Conduct of the police officers filmed at the Key shop is still under investigation. Recently, former Boston Police Commissioner Leo J. Sullivan died. Perhaps some words he wrote in a letter to CBS Reports are worth repeating and remembering. He said, "In the final analysis, the people of this and every other community must come to the realization that it is their small individual bet that finances the illegal gambling empire, and complete enforcement is not possible without the active assistance of all good citizens." This is Walter Cronkite. Good night.
CBS Reports, Biography of a Bookie Joint, was filmed and edited by the staff of CBS Reports under the supervision and control of CBS News.